Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and the DOJ has released the Ghislaine Maxwell interview tapes that just took place in July. On Friday, when this happened, I was asked to be on a Mario Nafal broadcast. I'd only listened to about 90 minutes or so of the tapes. Of course, I continue to, and we are going to do future broadcasts going over all of the tapes, but you're not going to want to miss this one where we give you a cursory example of what was said and what was denied. I do want to remind people I cannot do it without you. Please, please, please consider supporting the broadcast in the links down below, whether it be the Buy Me a Coffee or the PayPal, and buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. We're talking about more Epstein again. Just when you thought we were done talking to about Epstein, nope, you're dragged back in, clawing out of the Epstein pit, and you're dragged back in by your feet, nails in the dirt, and we're back talking about Epstein because today there was a new, I don't know if we're calling it a bombshell report, bombshell release, shocking release. But I guess Trump was dared, and he did it. He released the audio and transcripts of, how do you guys say her name? Ghislaine Maxwell, right?
Yeah.
All of her audio and transcripts, and, well, some of it's redacted. Congress is getting a few document dumps. They're going to figure out what they're going to be able to get, not get. But the big takeaway was Maxwell says Trump didn't do anything wrong. Trump didn't do it. Now I know Jason's going to have something to say about this too. I'm sure Tara will as well. But the thing is, for the longest time, a lot of people have been demanding this black book, demanding these documents, demanding what they call Epstein files, even though that's a moving target of what the Epstein files actually are. We need to be specific what you want released because things have been released. So now we have this testimony from Maxwell suggesting that this black book isn't a real thing. It was concocted by a combination of different things, she says. And she says that Trump didn't do anything wrong. So this is where we are today. A lot of people are suggesting, well, who believes what a word she says, which is why everyone said she shouldn't testify. Nevertheless, here we are. She was given a very limited type of immunity for her testimony that wouldn't get her in trouble for anything she says. Now, she does have a case on appeal. Of course, her cooperating and saying nice things maybe would make her think she's going to get off scot-free. Who knows? But with that, I'll throw it over to my panel joining me today. As of now, we have Miss Tira. Usually hear her on Spaces, and now you won't see her, but you'll hear her on video.
And now you'll still hear me. Nothing has changed, people.
And my good friend Jason, he's been here talking about Epstein, I think, from the jump. I'm sure he has audio clips lined up. Every show he's a guest on, it's like he's the host, and he's always ready to go. Welcome, everybody. I'll go ladies first. Tira, I know you're shocked. You wanted to say Trump did it. Now you don't believe Trump did anything wrong at all, and you're ready to vote for him for a third term, right?
I do not believe that he was ever listed in the so-called Epstein files in any criminal way. I've never believed that. I think he was a friend. I think he might have done some things on his own that were not perhaps quite legal, but I don't think he's ever been listed in here. So this is not a revelation. I think the revelation are two things. First of all, yes, she said Trump had nothing to do. She also said Clinton didn't do anything. She basically also said she didn't do anything, which is what I find the most amusing, right? I mean, this woman has more or less her testimony, as far as I've read. I haven't finished the second transcript. I'm in the middle. As far as I can tell, her whole testimony is, I didn't know anything. I had nothing to do. I only hired legitimate masseuses. He changed. He took testosterone after I knew him. I barely was involved, even though they're paying me $250,000 a year. And so at the end of this, basically, she has exonerated herself. And it was all that nasty, unnamed, although we know who it is, Virginia Giuffre, who actually was, she was 16, but she was a hardened criminal at that point, and she did bad things. It's pretty, look, all I can say is I am hoping, because otherwise this is a joke, I am hoping that the Trump administration will be able to get her for lying, because one of the exceptions to the proffer today was perjury. Now, if she's saying, I know nothing about all these 12 women who testified against me. No, no, no. I had nothing to do, didn't get involved. If they can show that, they actually have a case against her, forgetting whether she wins her appeal. They would have a current case against her for perjury. So I'm sort of, the only thing I can hope for here is that they were trying to get at that, because otherwise this is sort of like a weird whitewash, and I don't really understand it. It didn't strike me as a particularly great line of questioning. And there are clearly inconsistencies, let's just say, between everything we've heard before and what she's saying. Thanks.
Yeah. But that's the thing. She was already convicted, I think, of perjury. Wasn't perjury one of the things that she was convicted on? Or
I thought it was just sex trafficking. I don't think it was perjury.
I thought there was at some point a perjury charge that she had. I got to look it up. For some reason, it's in my mind, but I could be wrong. I think Lev's at a drive-through here. I don't know what's going on.
He's at Tim Hortons in Canada or something. Yeah.
Lev is fleeing. I need to notify the authorities. Lev is fleeing the country.
I'm fleeing the country. After what I saw today, I mean, I can't take it anymore.
Well, bye. No, I was kidding. I'm going to go over to Jason and I'll throw it over to you. Lev is in his vehicle. That is the vehicle cam that we are seeing there. Jason... I don't know what to do. It's Friday, man. Jason, I'm throwing it over to you.
Now been stopped by the
I don't even know. Like
He's not even here anymore.
He just got drone striked, I think.
Let us hope not. In light of reading it, I was like, I want to listen to it. I would rather actually watched it, because there are a few times where she kind of breaks down into tears. I'm only about 90 minutes or so deep in the whole thing. Basically the tail end of what she's talking about via Les Wexner. Overall, the whole thing seems really bizarre. Okay, so you just mentioned the appeal, right? Well, what are they appealing? Because according to Ghislaine Maxwell, this is the first time she has talked to anybody involved in any Epstein case regarding law enforcement. Let me repeat that. Apparently, there is nobody that ever talked to her, although you can watch witness after witness and accuser after accuser in the Palm Beach case where, their identity is blurred out, where they name Ghislaine Maxwell. And we have all these reports now for well over a decade that it was not just Ghislaine Maxwell, but Sarah Kalin, Leslie Groff, Nadia Marcinkova, and Adriana Ross at a bare minimum, that got a non-prosecution agreement. Now, we're supposed to believe that this non-prosecution agreement happened without Ghislaine Maxwell ever talking to anybody in law enforcement. That's pretty bizarre. Another takeaway from one of the first questions she's asked is about her father and his involvement in intelligence. She's quite evasive and I think pretty cunning about that. We should also note that she has 3 lawyers in the room at the time. Okay, so when she's asked about that, she takes it all the way back to British intelligence during World War II. When she's pressed about more, she goes, well, I don't know what he was doing in a formal capacity, but he certainly knew people and talked to people and did things. And again, you got. I guess you could read the transcript or you go listen to it. In fact, I'd encourage people to go check everything out. I'm going to show where everybody can do that. You can either just follow Todd Blanche, or it is actually on the Department of Justice's own site. The test ones are just what they think, that they're garbage, but everything else has at least 20 or so minutes. I think there was one just below 20 minutes, etc. of this. Look, I don't know that we're getting any kind of real revelations here. As Tira said, there was a connotation that if, in fact, she was proven to be a perjurer here, they could charge her. Or if somebody bore witness and it was something against her and there was a new investigation, they could possibly charge her with something. There was really no criminal activity here discussed. In large part, as far as how Epstein made his money, they mentioned the Dalton School, very good at math, being able to recover stolen or laundered money for groups or billionaires. It was kind of bizarre, and I think she kind of caught herself in the middle of it, that she brought up El Chapo as an example, as though he would be dealing with cartel members. She's like, oh, this is all fictitious, but let's say, the Sinaloa cartel and El Chapo have $1 billion taken. I do want to remind people, just a little side El Chapo note, El Chapo was actually held in the same prison that Epstein was held in. And of course, the headlines are that Ghislaine Maxwell does not believe that Epstein committed suicide. Well, El Chapo was safe in that prison. In fact, it was 14 years before Epstein that we had a suicide in that prison. And it's working on just about 6 years since Epstein that we had a suicide in that prison, as no one's killed themselves. So in the last 20 years, there's one person that's been able to kill themselves at MCCC, and on the second attempt, no doubt, as the most high-profile prisoner that maybe other than El Chapo they ever had. So, look, this coupled with the fact that you had Judge Berman in New York deny the opening of the grand jury testimony. And then the other big Epstein story is, yes, we got these, but we're also supposed to get a ton of documents moved over to the Department of Justice, according to James Comer, to start being released out into the public. And as you know, if we are talking documentation and what I would expect if we're releasing the quote-unquote Epstein files, they would include things of this nature. And a lot of people aren't talking about it. We just got that signed dollar bill by Bill Gates and him with a bunch of Saudis. Well, here are a bunch of blacked out binders. And I would remind people this is from the same raid. And those photographs that you saw of, MBS and Epstein, etc., and the dollar bill signed by Gates is in the same raid, and they had the same blackouts via the FBI. That means somebody within law enforcement is leaking the unredacted stuff. Here are burned DVDs. And remember, those books you just saw, they could very well have photographs, or they could have DVDs like this that say 8/12 dated Selena AV, aka audio video shoot number 2. The DVD next to it says audio video photos. Pretty apparent what those are. So we would have to get those. I'm not holding my breath. Then we have the hard drives here that appear to have already been taken by law enforcement. So this is the New York raid. Why are there hard drives with police evidence tape on them there when the only place that had been raided up until that point was Florida? And why were they given back, and why would he keep them there? And by the way, take a look above them. You'll notice a Black Hawk helicopter and then one of those lovely blacked out photos that we were discussing. So we could keep going, and we will. There is Bradley Edwards, who won in Epstein in civil court with boxes of documents pertaining to him and the many victims of Epstein, including Virginia Giuffre Roberts that he represented, stacked 4 high and about, 15 deep. So we would have to get that documentation. And of course, one of the things we have seen now is the Trump letter, the supposed love letter.
Well, that has been denied by Trump. He says
did he sue him yet? David?
What?
David, did he sue him yet? Oh.
Does that have to do it? Just
he talked about, listen,
did it.
All I'm saying, David, is I didn't break out my jump to conclusions, Matt, on that one. All of a sudden, at the same time, what did we get? What did we get? We got real pictures of Epstein at his second wedding with Marla Maples. We knew they had the relationship.
Right.
Hold on, this book isn't just a love letter from Trump. Apparently, there is a Bill Clinton letter. There's one from Woody Allen. It's on Trump paperhead. I don't think that Trump wrote it. I think he probably said to whatever aide, hey, write something up. They read it back. He goes, I like that. Add this. And then he decided he was going to do a little...
my name to the...
to the genitals of the joke. That David, if you can't admit that's his sense of humor, that's on you. I don't think that's anything criminal.
He didn't write MAGA on it, so I don't know. But
Well,
listen.
David, just let me point out that, first of all, Ghislaine Maxwell did not remember whether he was asked to write something or whether he wrote something. So she's not absolving him here. She just doesn't remember. She remembers a lot else, but not this one. Secondly, Trump first said he didn't do it. Absolutely, I'm going to sue. And then the second thing he said was, well, if it is there, it's a fake, which is an interesting sort of thing to say, because that would absolve Rupert Murdoch. If he got a fake, he's okay in printing it. But Trump has changed his story.
But let me say this, and this is consistent. And there has not been, and I challenge anybody to provide me alternate evidence of this. There has been zero evidence as of this point, zero testimony that's credible, at least, that has suggested that Trump has done anything inappropriate with respect to his relationship with Epstein. Nobody denies that he knew Epstein. It's well documented. He has said that they knew each other, they hung out, then they had a falling out based on the way he was acting with some of his staff at Mar-a-Lago, taking some of his employees, and then when he found out what he did, and apparently they had a falling out, and that was that. That's Trump's official position. A lot of people have questioned whether that's fine, but Trump has denied from the very beginning that he did anything inappropriate with respect to Epstein, and there hasn't been a shred of actual evidence, credible evidence, presented to suggest otherwise. In fact, all the evidence has been put forward suggests the opposite, that he hasn't had any inappropriate relationships. Maxwell, today, this came out of her testimony. Also, we interviewed on Mario's channel, we interviewed a woman who supposedly was like the origin of we interviewed two people. One person who was the origin of the Black Book, supposedly. Another woman who worked with victims. And they went through the Black Book, and certain names were highlighted that had done certain things. And in every interview I've had, not a single person suggested that Donald Trump did anything inappropriate at Epstein Island or anywhere with Epstein in any capacity. So I get it. A lot of people want to be able to tie this to Trump. And I guess the biggest criticism people have levied upon Trump is that they've, botched the release or the promises to be transparent. Things are still being released more so than we've ever had before, which I guess the biggest mistake Trump made was releasing anything to begin with, because this is more evidence than we've gotten. And now he puts it out, and it's never good enough. They wanted to interview Maxwell. Everyone's like, I don't think it's worth it to interview Maxwell. And by the way, she was charged with perjury. She was never, they never went forward with that case because it was a 2022 case. They prosecuted her on the crimes that she inevitably went to jail for, but the perjury charges never were prosecuted because of these other more serious crimes. But that being said, nobody thought her testimony would be worth anything in Congress because of what she was not only accused of, but convicted of, what she has at stake. So I guess my question to either Tara or Jason, like this, I said this in our last Epstein, one of our many Epstein spaces or shows. I said, it seems like it's a moving goalpost. No matter what happens, they're always going to be like, yeah, we have this, but now we need. Oh, we have this, but now we need. Well, we have this, but it doesn't suggest that. It's like no matter what, people can look through the forest to find the trees that support whatever assumptions they wish to make. And this goes on both sides. If you want to say the Clintons are implicated or not, you could, I'm not, at what point do we say, okay, when is it going to be enough? What do we need? And even when we get that, will it be enough? Either of you.
Well,
I'll respond.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, Jason. Okay. First of all, as I've said, I never thought that Trump had done anything particular, and I've always said that on these stages. And I do think, however, he has mishandled the investigation and the release of things. And I don't know why. I believe that MAGA made this into a cause célèbre when he was out of office. They were the ones, it wasn't Democrats saying, oh my God, we need to release. This has been Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and to a limited extent, Donald Trump have made this a big deal. I never thought there was a list. I do think there is more evidence, but I think this was all sort of this conspiracy theory that was ginned up by MAGA, and now they're stuck, right? Because they said, oh, it must exist. Yeah. Now, do I think there is evidence that I've never thought there's any probative evidence at this point, because if there were, I suspect other people would have been indicted. And this is a hard case. It's hard because it's going to be a victim against a specific person. And some of these victims have, drug and there are reasons why we don't bring these sort of cases, right? He said, she said, stuff like that. But I do think that Trump has mishandled this, and I do not understand why. Okay. If you read the Berman decision, what you see is he said it was a diversion. This is the decision that did not unseal the grand jury records. But he also said the Justice Department has 100,000 pages, 100,000 pages. I have 70 in the grand jury. They can release what they want to. Why aren't they doing this? So the real question I have is not that I think Trump is in this, but why haven't they just released stuff? I don't think he's in it. I don't even think it's probative. There's stuff they can't release. I get that. There's a lot that would be perhaps because she has an ongoing appeal or victims, but there are things they can release. I just don't understand why they've, why Pam Bondi said what she said, why they've all said what they said. And I think they're stuck because they were the ones who made it such a big deal.
I think that's a fair point. Tara, you're one of those reasonable people who are not conservative that I get to talk to, because I think you make a really excellent point with all of that. I do think it was. I think everybody admits, like, it could have been handled better with respect to whether the binders were piled. If there was a pile of papers on, the files were on Pam's desk. They're gonna look. Nah, she didn't really mean that literally. And then it was the binders with the influencers. It's just been like, and then the leaked memo. There has just been You're right, Tara. It's like, what the heck, man? We can't get our own way. I do also think MAGA made more of an issue of this than they should have, and we're sort of stuck with it. I think that's fair as well. And you have seen previously a split when the first FBI memo left, like, hey, we were promised this and we didn't get it. I think MAGA's probably gotten over it at this point. I think we'll never really quite get over the fact that the rollout was sloppy. That being said, I think a lot of the implications of the rollout, of the sloppiness of it, of all of that, I think one side is definitely taking liberties to suggest that it's covering up evidence of wrongdoing. The other side is just suggesting means Pam Bondi was acting inappropriately, should be fired, or Dan Bongino, or Cash. I don't think anybody really knows what to do with it. And I think that's fair that you said that, Tara, that I don't think we understand why or how. That being said, we don't have any conclusions. And with every one of these releases and every one of these shows we do, it seems like we have in Jason's specifically. I mean, you were very knowledgeable on this. Have you gotten any of the answers you wanted? And are you optimistic that we're going to get any of the answers that you want? I mean, regardless of what, even if they give unredacted files, let's imagine, right, in your dream world, all of those blacked out binders, everything gets turned over to Congress.
Oh, Congress. How about Jason?
Everything.
How about they just turn it over to me?
They just give it to you, right? They invite you to the White House. DC Drano, not invited. Jason invited. You show up to the White House. They give you a nice dinner. It's McDonald's. It's a Big Mac. It's fries. It's delicious. We're having a great time. And they go, here's all the files. And you look through. Oh, yes, no redactions. You take it home. You got your highlighters in several different colors. Days later, you emerge unshaven, hungry.
Months later.
Months later.
Yes, months later.
And then you said, I've looked through everything. But you know what's still missing? This. They didn't give me anything. They left because this is where I feel like this goes. No matter how much, unless you get exactly what you want, unless the people get exactly what they believe exists, they're never going to be happy. So
first of all, David, you're not wrong. Okay, like again, you're not wrong in that sense
way
because
to say you disagree.
No, listen, I totally get it that there is always going to be someone that says there's something more, even if there isn't in any kind of historical significant context, right? Any type of event. We could go on like that forever, but there are just so many things that we haven't hit upon. If you've noticed, Tira and I align on the fact that out of the gates, I told you there was no list, right? Yeah. So a lot of these questions that so far, because again, I'm going to listen to the whole thing. I might have a different opinion afterwards. I only saw the headlines and, like I said, listened to about 90 minutes of it. But the fact of the matter is that when they're talking about intelligence, they don't ask her if she ever worked for intelligence. That's crazy. Okay, that was never even asked. I mean, again, the timeline of no law enforcement talking to this woman when she's named by so many of these victims that did end in a criminal conviction makes no sense, brother. Okay, and, you know, I want to take it back a little bit further because, you kind of skipped over the part where you talked about no credible evidence against Trump doing anything illegal, right? Anything nefarious. I tend to agree with that. I've never seen anything stuck. Now, there have been allegations. I want to put those out there just so that I'm not, oh, you're stumping for Trump. You do have the Katie Johnson allegations that twice went away. And again, if you want to listen to somebody that does say that she met Trump and did something at an underage thing via Epstein, this is now almost a decade old, and obviously she's in a disguise, etc. But it is there. The fact that that was never pressed upon has always made me think that might have been a distraction, okay? But, for instance, Michael Wolff, who I don't necessarily trust, I don't think that you trust, he does have audio tapes, maybe very similar to what Ghislaine Maxwell's saying, probably Jeffrey Epstein painting himself in the best light. He's released some of that where Epstein talks about him being Trump's best friend, but he also says that he saw a picture of Donald Trump at Epstein's estate surrounded by a bunch of topless women. Is that out of the realm of possibility? No. Do I believe it out of the gates? No. Does it make Trump guilty of anything? No. Does it make him look good with the base? No. So nobody's a winner there. However, the key things that we simply have not hit upon is where he actually made his money and his moves. Because I think there is not only a plethora of evidence for the intelligence angle that I think is almost overly played at this point, especially when you're just harping on Israel. Yes, Israel's a big deal. I get it. But do you realize that this guy has a relationship with Adnan Khashoggi, where it's Israeli and Saudi arms dealing during the 80s? And then he's also got a relationship with MBS all the way up through that Trump deal in the first administration of what, $474 billion or something like that? It was an insane arms deal.
Yeah.
That's where the real money is. And for those that would think, Jason, you are just wild saying these things, let's not forget, I'm going to show a couple articles here. And I want people to kind of think about this. Arnon Milken, huge Hollywood producer, admits to arms dealing in the 70s. Who's he arms dealing with? Well, it's on behalf of Israel, who he's also spying for. You know who else is doing that with him? Sidney Pollack. You may recognize him as the bad guy from Eyes Wide Shut, another big Hollywood player. So these things absolutely happen, and there's no... Did those guys go to jail for anything? Were they ever investigated for anything? Did we ever have any hearings about that? And that brings it kind of back to Acosta. And, you know, I'd love for you to get Michael Tracy on this, because he's all of a sudden, you know, defending Epstein, essentially saying, you know, it was just maybe a teenage girl or two. There is no ring. There's nothing to worry about here.
Really?
Attacking Whitney Webb, all of it.
Yes, he's also saying that it was blackmail of Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan. That's the only reason that they, you know, there wasn't anything there. The victims aren't necessarily
credible. I mean, that's why, again, you have banks like that paying out hundreds of millions of dollars, and people like Jess Staley, after that initial conviction, where, again, we have this non-prosecution deal we still can't see, okay, is in Epstein's hot tub after the fact. And they're all joking about how Epstein likes his girls young and in Disney outfits. Yeah, all above board. But really, bring it back to the intelligence angle. You know, I played the clip recently. I'm not sure if it was on this show, but of Alex Acosta, literally 24 hours after he was asked whether or not Epstein was intelligence, and that's why he gave him the deal. He, of course, obfuscates that question. And then Trump, okay, come on, David. Trump likes to spin a tale. He's standing next to Acosta, and he's going, you know, Albert's done such a great job. He called me up last night. He said he didn't want to be a distraction to the administration anymore, so he's just going to resign. Yeah, I'm sure the Treasury Secretary called Trump up to tell him he didn't want to be a distraction about Epstein and just resigned. No, you made him resign. You wanted it to go away then, and to his credit, it did go away for some time. People had a lot of hopium, you know, because they had that arrest. Ghislaine Maxwell.
Favorite drug.
Yeah, well, Ghislaine Maxwell had jail time now. You know, it was moving in the right direction. That's why they laid off. They really thought Trump 2.0, superhero time, they were getting everybody. Hey, man, I'll tell you this. I'm real happy John Bolton got raided today. I told you on these broadcasts we would probably get indictments with this Russiagate thing, with the election 2020. I'm not holding my breath for convictions. At least we're pushing forward. At least we're moving the Overton window in the public. Is that enough, David? I don't think so. But, I mean, again, I think the only reason that we have this Ghislaine Maxwell interview is because of people like myself that have been harping on this for the better part of 20 years.
You know, that's a good point. It is a fair point. Because people have been asking. Trump is like, I'll just give you what I have. Well, what he can give you. But like I said before, no matter what, it's never going to be enough. It's hungry dogs, and you could throw them all the meat you want. They're not leaving. And so at some point, and this goes back to Trump's original sort of dismissal of it, like, I'm moving on. You're either with me or you're not. You need me more than I need you. And it's sort of like, what do you want from me? There's other things I'm trying to work on. Now, you did bring up something. You always bring up something interesting. So it's not like this is like, oh, you brought up one thing that was interesting. But the intelligence angle of this, right? Because I think that is really the key here. Because I think everybody here will agree that all the stuff that everybody hopes they'll find in quote unquote the Epstein files is never going to be there. So Trump is never going to be reliably named in anything. Probably the Clintons on either. You know, nobody who's going to show up that they're hoping is going to show up with a smoking gun saying, see, we told you. I don't think anybody's ever going to see that. They're going to want things until the end of time to prove it. It'll never be there. But the thing that I think is worth exploring, and this is something that maybe Congress, I think, has a role to play in with its oversight authority, is the role of domestic and foreign intelligence in the United States. And this is something that I think a lot of people can at least get from this, and it's worth a discussion because that's not a moving goalpost. I think we can all agree that we know now from the release of the RFK files, the MLK files, JFK files, we have seen intelligence operating within the United States and abroad. Like, we've seen it. It's in the documents. So we know how intelligence operates, right? We've seen now with the Crossfire Hurricane investigation that foreign and domestic intelligence was abusing our FISA system in order to get warrants and investigate things in order to spin a narrative. This we know to be true. And I've spoken to plenty of people on Mario's channels, people who seem to know what they're talking about, who say that, yeah, of course, Epstein was an asset of Israel. This is the way they operate. They find the most salacious type of activities to involve people, and they get blackmail on them. And from what I've heard, it all has to do with Iran at the end of the day, because Israel wants to have a bargaining chip in defense of itself against other countries. And so while it wants to sit back and hope at the end of the day that the United States will come to its aid if necessary because they're our strongest ally, you could have a president like Biden who might not have a strong relationship with Israel, and Iran becomes an issue. It's really helpful to have people like Epstein with dirt on everybody. So I think these are more of the conversations that we need to start having, is how do we, and by the way, if you're intelligence, it is no secret that Israel is the largest, conducts the most espionage in America.
Can I just pause you for a second, just quick? Because it's not just Israel. Let me pull this up for you.
Well, there's other countries.
Well, let me give you just an example how our country sits on blackmail of others, okay?
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't. Yeah.
Well, just take a look here, okay? So those that don't know about a guy
really
named
like
Lord
to show
Mountbatten.
your graphics.
Yeah, well, Lord Mountbatten, pretty big deal, part of that royal family, you know,
Right.
uncle of Prince Charles. You know what he was known as in the intelligence circles? It was Lord Mountbottom. And that was because of his lust for young boys. And they knew about that, I believe, all the way back in the 50s. And yet, did he get prosecuted? Did they care legally? Did they stop doing business with the royal family? Or do you think they leveraged that information? So, look, that's my point, is we hear about Israel a lot. And yes, they do it. We do it too. Russia does it too. I don't want to condone any of this stuff. And my big thing is we also have to look in the mirror. The thing is, again, we don't want to admit that, let's say, because Ghislaine Maxwell, she makes herself out to be, like I said, the biggest victim ever. She takes you back in time and when and how she met this guy. She says that Robert Maxwell, who, again, she alludes to being intelligence but doesn't really give any details on, doesn't know Epstein, but yet Bear Stearns was working with him, and I think it was Ace Greenberg and another gentleman that introduced him to Epstein after the fact. There's a lot of gray area here. And when you're dealing with somebody, again, that's moving that type of money around and has those connections, nation states, in my opinion, that's just part of it. You know, you might be doing...
Well, right, no, I agree with you, but I want to go to Tara, because here's the question, though. Whether it's domestic, whether it's international, and we do know for a fact, this isn't speculation, this isn't hypothetical, we know for a fact that intelligence operates in a certain way inside and outside the United States. We know that for sometimes it's actually for our own good, because it's trying to defend us from threats. You know, especially if somebody's trying to build a bomb in their garage. We want intelligence making friends with those people and making sure the FBI knocks on their door before something explodes. I get it. But the blackmail operations, though, that gray area that you talk about, Tara, this is the question. Who can stop? First question is, do you agree that that's probably a bad thing for these blackmail operations to be employed both in the United States by the government, by our government and other governments, knowing that they operate like that? And if it's not okay, what can we do about it?
Can we do about it? I don't think we
It's a royal
do
we.
anything about much. No. I'm saying, in general, I think individual people have very limited options in these areas. Do I like it? No. Do I think sometimes it might have led to some good results? Very possibly. I can't answer that. You know, if you have compromise on someone who is really bad and you can do something, maybe that's not the worst thing. But I think, look, I don't know what Epstein was involved with. I don't even know that he had lists of people that he was actually blackmailing. I can't verify that. There is not, the evidence is not there yet. I would, I think that would be a sort of a prudent way to go about looking at things. I would like to see that. Maybe there is some of that stuff in the files. Maybe we can, but Ghislaine Maxwell is giving you nothing. She is saying that essentially she was just a lovelorn, as far as I can tell. She just really wanted a relationship, and they slept together once, and 9 months later they slept together again, and then she realized he had issues, and it was so sad. She's not the person to give us this, and she is whitewashing herself and her father. And they did not ask many questions about this. They did not, she said Epstein didn't know Maxwell, right? She's basically sort of saying there was nothing like this going on. So where do you think we can get this evidence from, David?
I would like to throw this in because this
Yeah.
is kind of a newer thing that I just reported on last week and did not know about. It actually came out August 8th. So, and I haven't really seen it in the media. Jeffrey Epstein's former mentor reveals incriminating tapes exist, but deep state cabal buried them. This is actually Steve Hoffenberg. So Steve Hoffenberg died several years ago. He was in business with Epstein via Towers Financial in the largest Ponzi scheme ever prosecuted before Madoff. Somehow Jeffrey Epstein doesn't go to jail. Hoffenberg does. But then Hoffenberg, after he gets out of jail, they reelect him to the head of the company because they knew that he got the screw job. Very odd, right? Well, Hoffenberg allegedly gave a deathbed taped interview with the National Enquirer, I think about a month before he actually died, saying that, yes, Epstein, in fact, was taping individuals and then sending it back, quote unquote, to a deep state cabal, whatever that means. All I can say is, I'm not reporting on this. I have not seen Hoffenberg's deathbed confession. I was kind of peripherally, in communication with Hoffenberg. I think we DM'd back and forth. I never got him on an interview before he died. But again, this is somebody that for whatever reason may have had this information. And by the way, Hoffenberg did work with the FBI to shorten his sentence as well. And we know that Epstein himself also, David, worked with the FBI. We have that agreement back during the Palm Beach case. So these are, and again, I just showed you that the good people at the FBI had sexual blackmail information on a royal pedophile going back to the late 50s.
Yeah.
David, they should be talking to Alex Acosta, who did say publicly that he was told to lay off Epstein because of, quote, intelligence reasons. I don't understand why the House has not subpoenaed him. He would be the first person you'd think if you wanted some of this information. Now, he said it was vague what he talked about, but I'm suspecting he knows more information. Why aren't we talking to him?
Yeah, all those are great questions. This is why I think Congress has really the ability here, more than anybody else, to at least subpoena some of these people. I mean, look, you saw the Oversight Committee send out subpoenas to a bunch of people, including the Clintons the other day. They're not going to respond to them. But I mean, they have the ability to do it. But again, like at the end of the day, you can't, Tara, you know this. I mean, we can't put people in jail because, well, you can for contempt. But for the most part, you can't put people in jail for thinking they did something. We need to prove it. And if the evidence doesn't exist and we have no way of getting the evidence, all we're left with is a bunch of speculation and frustration, which is where we're at, which is where we've been at.
But that's what I've been saying the whole time. And as I feel really sorry for the victims here. This is not a hoax.
Yeah.
Epstein did terrible things. There are clearly victims. We should get that out of the way.
Yes,
okay. I don't know what Trump was talking about. Not a hoax. It exists. Okay?
I think Trump was talking about the outrage of the Epstein thing being the hoax.
But the Democrats didn't put documents in the files and then not release them. I mean, come on. This is all nonsense. Okay. There are real people whose lives were impacted horribly by this horrible person and by Ghislaine Maxwell. And I don't want to forget that because, the rest of it is, there's a lot of speculation, but that's what we know.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems is 20 years have gone by and memories have faded. And there's, look, if you put Ghislaine Maxwell on, let's say she had said, oh yes, this happened, Jeffrey did this, she wouldn't be credible in a trial. Her testimony would be worthless, because they'd say, well, did you get a deal? Did you blah, blah, blah? And so to me, you would need videos. You would need you would need more than one person saying the same thing, because the guy is going to say, I didn't do it. And this is the problem that we're having here. And this is, I feel, in a way, I feel sorry for the people who are very invested in getting, relief for the victims and helping the victims, because I don't think that's going to happen legally.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying that horrible things didn't happen to them. I believe they did, but they're just not going to get that in a court in a criminal case right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is the sort of, I don't know, what do you call this? This is the sort of the conundrum, like where we're at, and this is where we've been at. And all we can do is one of two things: speculate, like Jason does, and he does a great job doing it, and try to like connect the dots and expose things. And I know he's committed a lot of resources and time and his career essentially to exposing things that people don't want people to know about. And there's a place for that. Then there's the practical side of it is, okay, now that we have this information, what can we do with it? And I think that's the frustrating part that inevitably everybody arrives at is we all want answers to a lot of things. And you're right, the victims deserve justice. They've had some justice, not enough justice. There are real victims. But what do we do? And this is where I'm at. I don't know. Jason, what do we do?
I just continue to try to shine light on the darkness and win over the court of public opinion. There was a long time ago when I first got into this, talking about 9/11 specifically. And I really did think that, we were going to get trials. We were going to take our constitutional republic back. People were going to be talking about Building 7 in criminal hearings, et cetera, et cetera. But if anything's taught me about the real world, it is that situation, right? We're still talking about Building 7, even though now it's a little bit more accepted. That doesn't mean anyone's going to prison. I know other documents exist on 9/11, not just because they've been talked about via the Trump administration, but you had a hacker group called the Dark Overlord that tried to do $1 million Bitcoin heist, essentially. And essentially, as you hit tiers, they released encryption codes for these level of files. They hit their mark on the first one. They got a little money for the second one. Then they released the third one. Then they were arrested. And we never heard from them again, and 2 layers didn't come out. There were a lot of things in those documents that had never been seen and still really aren't talked about to this day, including James Woods and his testimony in court about the fact that he was on Flight 11 prior to 9/11 and felt that they were going to be hijacked, that 2 of those people ended up being the quote-unquote hijackers from that day. That he, the stewardess, and the pilot on the plane all filed reports with local law enforcement and FBI. I mean, there's a ton. I could sit here and talk about 9/11 for literally 3 hours. In fact, Mario, anniversary's coming up. Love to debate somebody that wants to go mainline on that story. But that's kind of the moral of the story, right? We haven't had executive accountability. That's why, my nipples perked up a little bit today when they got walrus mustache.
That might be a little too much information, Jason.
Did they?
They did. Guys, when I saw like a guy that I've watched for 2+ decades lecture me about the Middle East and weapons of mass destruction and terrorists get raided, I smiled a little bit on the inside. I can't sit here.
That was interesting, right? Let's talk about that for a second, because I know the Epstein stuff broke. It's big news. But John Bolton, I called him Michael Bolton like 7 times today, by the way, and then I immediately thought about The Office.
Okay, so does Trump. Don't worry about it.
And then I immediately started thinking about Office Space or whatever that movie is, where the guy's name was Michael Bolton. Like, I had this whole mental exercise of misstating his name. Let's talk about the John Bolton thing, because that is really kind of fascinating, right? You're exactly right. I mean, here's a guy who, when you look up warmonger in the dictionary, you see his mustache.
When James Mattis met him for the first time, have you ever seen the video? When James Mattis meets him for the first time, he shakes his hand and he goes, I heard that you're the devil. Or it's either the devil or Lucifer. And then they crack a joke about it. That's how notorious John Bolton was as a warmonger.
And he gets raided and if people didn't know, he gets raided today because he published memoirs in 2020. There was an investigation. I think Trump started the investigation because he didn't want those memoirs released. He claimed it contained classified information. Biden stopped that prosecution. The prosecution restarted again, from what I read. I could be mistaken, but I think that's what I saw. And then, of course, his house was raided this morning. And this is essentially revolving around classified. This has nothing to do with Crossfire Hurricane or anything like that. It's supposedly like he released classified information with respect to the memoirs, and that's the purpose of the prosecution. Tira, what do you make of all of that? I want to get you in this conversation too. I feel bad because you're just, I don't see you, so I don't want to forget that you're there. What did you make of the John Bolton, Michael Bolton situation?
The Michael Bolton, I love his voice. I love his singing. I feel bad. Didn't he have cancer or something very bad? No,
my gosh.
So look, I don't know how smart John Bolton is about these things, but I somehow assume that if he had classified information from 2020, that he might have gotten rid of it. I understand that, especially because he's been under investigation once or twice, right? It's not like this came as a total surprise, I suspect. So the only way that this would be particularly helpful to any prosecution, I don't think there's a current prosecution, there's a current investigation, would be if they find classified information that he has, that was not that he should not have, which would be, I suspect, any classified information. So the real question is, what did they find? And what, were they tipped off that something was there? I recognize that in the book, they thought he had used classified information, but that's, you'd have to, the search itself means nothing unless it comes up with something. I don't have an answer. I don't know. Jason's about to talk.
Yeah, can I just speak to the whole because the classified documents thing.
As long as it doesn't involve anything that happened to your body with respect to your
I couldn't help myself. I'm going
to it's okay if you say your eyes feel better.
Yes. Yeah, no. Guys, I'm going to a Rust Belt rave right after this. Totally different story. And that's a real thing. My friend is throwing this rave party. It's usually not my cup of tea, but we're going to do it. Classified documents, okay? I know they're all the rage during the Trump administration. It's Mar-a-Lago busts and it's Biden Corvette garages. Because we were talking about 9/11 and classified documents, let me give people a little bit reminder how much we're really concerned about classified documents. Sandy Berger got caught stuffing classified 9/11 documents down his pants to destroy them from review during the 9/11 commission process and had to plead guilty. You know what they did to Sandy? You know what they did? A little bit of this. No prison time for Sandy. Sandy didn't, it wasn't even a story. Do you think any of the classified documents that we're talking about via Bolton and whatever memoirs he's talking about, or what was in Joe Biden's garage via corruption or whatever they said Trump had, compare even minusculely to that? I assure you they don't. And yet, again, this shows you there is an executive within an executive that has oversight. You can call it the deep state, the shadow government, the continuity of government program. Globalists, whatever. It exists. There are these rails that if you get a little too close to them, not only do they not touch them, they will do everything in their power to manipulate the narratives surrounding them. And that's, essentially, that's the whole Epstein story. Where do we manipulate these narratives?
Can we just, I think the funniest thing about Sandy Berger is, like, he took 5 copies. It wasn't like one, put them down his pants and then destroyed 3 of them with scissors, but he said it was an honest mistake.
Yeah.
You know how that is.
My hand slipped on the scissors.
Right, you know how that is.
This is an interesting point, though, and I was talking about this earlier with somebody with respect to the Letitia James thing, because that was another big story there has been, in the last 24 hours, and then on top of that, Trump decides to do a press conference from the Oval Office today. But in the last 24 hours, there's been a lot of big news. The Letitia James, that it's $500 million now with penalties, judgment against Trump for fraud. That penalty was basically stricken down, whatever, because they said it violated the 8th Amendment because it was excessive. We all knew that, by the way. And 2 of the 5, there was 5 panels, or a panel of 5 judges. Letitia James, he's still guilty of fraud. I got that going for me. If you actually look at what the panel said, 2 of the 5 judges said that the case should be retried. 1 of the 5 judges said it should be dismissed completely. So a majority of the 5 judges actually thought the case was garbage completely, but they didn't have enough unanimity. They didn't all say the same thing with respect to that, so they all agreed that the amount of the judgment was bad. So let's pause there for a second, because at the same time, Letitia James herself is being investigated for what? Overstating the value of assets with respect to mortgages. At the same time, Adam Schiff is also being investigated because he's listed two separate residences, as being primary residences for the purpose of obtaining favorable mortgage rates. One being his D.C. house, that's a 4,000 square foot, $1.5 million house. The other one is a tiny little condo in some area in California, just used for residency, arguably. So, and this is to your point, Jason, because you said classified documents, this dude stuffs them down his pants and nothing gets a slap on the wrist. Trump, they indict federally. And same thing, $500 million judgment for falsifying business records. And by the way, one of the big arguments for that Trump committed fraud was that he valued Mar-a-Lago above what they claimed Mar-a-Lago was worth. They claimed Mar-a-Lago was worth $18 million as opposed to the $500 million figure that most people suggest that Mar-a-Lago is worth. An empty lot in Palm Beach where that Mar-a-Lago is worth more than $18 million. So that whole thing, the whole premise of it was flawed. But here's my point. And I don't want to say that left. I don't know who's responsible for this, because I don't want to put a political party, because political parties belong in politics. We're talking about our judicial system. This is something totally different. Politics shouldn't be in our judicial system. I think we can all agree on that. But that being said, when you create the standard that if you have classified documents in your house, you should get raided by the FBI and you should be charged on all these federal crimes. When the standard is, oh, you've committed fraud to get loans, favorable loan terms, you should be tried for fraud and have these humongous judgments levied against you. If this is the standard now, this is, I think this is the problem. John Bolton, he potentially releases classified documents. Well, now the FBI is raiding their house. And here's to Tira's point, or Jason's, I don't remember who said it, but the why John Bolton, why now? And if he had these documents, we had the Joe Biden thing and all this stuff. I think everybody in government for so long, and this perfect example to frame it all together, and I'll throw it back to you guys with the slap on the wrist stuff, have gotten away with this, taking classified documents home, eating dinner on top of it, TV dinners and whatnot. They just did it. They operated with just no penalties, look at AOC. She accepted donations beyond what she should have. And they said, but there's no penalty for it. We just said you shouldn't have done it. When George Santos is doing 7 years in jail. So the idea is you have all of these people who think they can just get away with it. Look at people like James Comey and John Clapper and everything we're finding out about. They're not in jail. They probably won't go to jail. So at what point do we have a system of justice? And Tara, I'll ask you, you're a lawyer. And you're not, and you're not in my world when it comes to what's that?
Ideology.
Yeah, you're not in my same corner ideologically. But at what point are we going to apply a fair standard to law enforcement? I mean, is this the new standard that if you have a document, FBI is coming to your house and raiding you? Or do we go back to the days when we're like, okay, well, he didn't mean to cut it with scissors? Where does this go? How do we sort of resolve the issue of the laws can't apply to certain people and not other people if nobody's above the law?
Well, first of all, I think that the weaponization of the Justice Department is unfortunately even stronger. I don't believe it was weaponized under Biden, but let's get around that. Let's just ignore that. Donald Trump is telling the Justice Department what to do. I mean, he's been pretty clear about that. They basically say we do what President Trump wants. We never had a Justice Department like that. We were always told it was semi-independent, that it made its own decisions. We are in a different world now where, political enemies are being targeted directly. And I don't know how we get out of any of these things. I don't think anybody, it's funny. Nobody should be above the law, but nobody should be treated differently because they are, a politician, etc. So the mortgage stuff, nobody gets prosecuted for these things. Never happens. The Justice Department never gets involved, but yet we are probably going to see people prosecuted. I suspect you have to show intent. They might get off. It's not clear to me. We're going to have all these crazy prosecutions and it's going to go on. How do we stop any of this, David? How do we stop the partisan stuff that goes on every single day that people are, every time I talk, everyone's like, you libtard X bitch, how do we stop any of this? I don't know. I do want to say one thing. However, you were wrong. 18 million is not what the Engeron said that Mar-a-Lago was valued at. What he said was the assessor had said it's between 18 and 27 million. Trump had said 400 to 600 million, something like that. And so the discrepancy between those two was what he was talking about. He did not value it at 18 million. But to your larger point, I wish I had an answer, because this is not a very pleasant world to be living in right now.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point. Jason, I'll throw it over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm one of those guys that wants to see heavy cuts in government and accountability. I don't care whether we're going after Democrats or Republicans. The vast majority of them, unfortunately, have been involved in some type of criminal activity. I'm not just saying that. I mean, I truly do believe that modern day lobbying, by the way, which was created by Roger Stone and partners. And when I interviewed Roger, I said, Roger, shouldn't we take the money out of lobbying? And just with a straight face, he'll go, I believe money is speech. Well, I don't. And I think that's a huge issue. I don't know how we regain a constitutional republic with checks and balances when we do have an executive within an executive, when we are not able to file an OIA and get the real documentation, when I believe that, this isn't a capitalistic nation. It's not even crony capitalism. In most cases, it's really techno-fascism. And that's one of my major concerns right now with this administration. Look, I think it's great that Tulsi Gabbard's about to cut DNI in half. The intelligence apparatus is totally bloated and totally corrupt. But I also, kind of think to myself, how much of that is going into AI? And can you really weed out every single bad actor in that community that sold me on chemical weapons that were not in Iraq, that sold me on the idea that Saddam and bin Laden were working together for a dirty bomb and all these other ludicrous things? I don't know that you can do that, right? I mean, so many of those things are built on echo chambers. I think you have to try. We got a long way to go, man. I hate the partisan stuff. I always tell people, no matter how your neighbor voted, if that's your neighbor and they live in your neighborhood in that house, like 20 feet away, chances are you've got way more in common with them than your politics would lead you to believe. So, at the end of the day, if we really want to change it, I think you do need criminal prosecutions. I don't know whether that's possible or not. I think, again, with the Epstein thing, it's not going away. Obviously, we'll see what happens this weekend after people let the Ghislaine Maxwell interview sink in. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of hot takes out there, a lot of things being said on Fox News. We'll see what documents supposedly come out via the Justice Department that they got in their possession supposedly today. But at the end of the day, do I think that there are going to be indictments or even prosecutions in that realm? Probably not. I think they may burn some people that are already dead, like Bill Richardson. They may try to frame it with the Clintons, like you talked about, these subpoenas. We both know Bill and Hillary Clinton are not showing up for these subpoenas. Therefore, you get that narrative and you can throw it that way. It's unfortunate. I am hoping and very hopeful that maybe we can see some justice in the Russiagate stuff, et cetera. But, this administration has already denied certain files that we were supposed to get via that Seth Rich case, and dare call me a conspiracy theorist to want to see those files as well. So, look, I don't know that we're having a big change in the system. I think the big change comes with the people. The problem is when that change comes, I think that too many people are corralled either into not only right and left team divides, but also into the realm of fantasy, which leads us to like, everybody's a pedophile and the white hats are coming and Q's going to save us with Donnie T. That doesn't really help anybody, does it, David?
No. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, look, I think we've covered all of it that we can cover today. We'll see what happens as the weekend goes and the spinsters take hold of it. But it was a fantastic conversation, Tara. Thank you so much.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, you absolutely can.
Yeah, look, what I want to say is Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty, right? There were credible witnesses against her. She has a claim on appeal that she was, that the indemnity agreement in effect indemnified her and she should not have been prosecuted. But I really want to see her. The fact that she was moved to a minimum security prison to me is a travesty.
Yeah.
The fact that people are not allowed to speak about her is a travesty. And quite frankly, if she does get off on appeal, I want to see that they should use this tape that they now have and see if they can't find some perjury in it, because I'm sure there is more than enough evidence to support that. I do not want to see. I feel that, the only reason she would get out is not because she's innocent, but because of a technicality. And
Yeah.
so I really think we should look at this. She's the only person right now being held liable for all of this. So if you feel strongly that someone should be held liable, make sure you tell people she should not be free for any particular reason. Thanks.
Yeah. It's an excellent point. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for the great discussion. As always, thank you for being here on a Friday night.
That is going to wrap it up for this broadcast. Once again, we are going to do future broadcasts on these tapes. Might even do a full-on listen-along marathon broadcast. Haven't decided yet. I do want to remind you, I need your help now more than ever. There are no paychecks. You are my support, $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. Big donations, couldn't do it without you. And as always, it is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I absolutely love you guys, and I will see you all on the flip side.